I want you to think about someone, a specific person, a senior professional in your field, someone you genuinely admire, a lecturer who changed how you thought about medicine, a clinician who or whose work you have followed for a while, a professional whose career path looks like something you would love to build, someone whose opinion you would value enormously, someone who, if they knew you existed, would change things for you. I want you to imagine that person, and I want to do so now. Have you ever reached out to that person? Have you ever reached out to that person? Sent them a message, written them an email, or introduced yourself after a talk they gave, asked them a genuine question about their work. Have you ever done that? For most of you, the answer is a no. And I want to ask you why. Not rhetorically. I want you to actually sit with the question. Why have you not reached out to them? Why haven't you reached out or to them through all the means that I've mentioned? Because I think if you are honest with yourself, the answer is not that you forgot. It is not that you didn't know how to find them. That is not the answer. It is something quieter than that. Something that sounds like this. What would I even say? Or they are too busy for someone like me. I don't want to bother them. Could be another reason that perhaps you give. Or I'll wait until I have something more to offer. Or I'll wait until I'm further along. Or I'll wait until I'm ready. Perhaps you resonate with any of those sentences as excuse why you haven't yet reached out to them. And that waiting, that patient, polite, self-effacing waiting is costing you more than you know. And today, I would like us to end it through this particular episode. Welcome back to After Campus series, and this is episode 12. Yesterday in episode 11, we built the foundation and we dismantled the myth of networking as performance. We replaced it with something more honest, relationship building as a professional habit. We talked about the three levels of a professional network. We talked about peers, we talked about mentors, we talked about sponsors, and we introduced the single most important mindset shift from what can I get to what can I bring. Now, today we make all of that practical, and we do so immediately. We do so specifically because the common or the most common question I receive from students and pre-interns when we talk about networking is not conceptual, it is practical. But how do I actually do it? That is one question that I normally get. But how do I actually do it? Or what do I actually say? Or how do I reach out without feeling like I'm imposing? That is exactly what this episode answers. And let's begin. And I want to tell you about a young graduate I'll call Zara. Now, Zara was brilliant. She knew it. Her supervisors knew it, that she was brilliant. And the people who worked alongside her in clinical rotations, of course, also knew that Zara was brilliant. And she had a clarity of thinking and a precision of communication that stood out even in a strong cohort. But Zara had a problem. And here is where I want you to pay attention the most. She had a problem. She could not make herself reach out to senior people. It was not shyness. That was not it exactly. In a room she already knew in a room she already knew with her peers, with classmates, with people at her level. She was confident, engaged, articulate. But the moment a senior professional entered the picture, something shifted. She became smaller. She became quieter, more careful, more apologetic. That was Zara, and that was her problem. And she told me once that reaching out to a senior professional felt like walking into someone's house uninvited. And you could relate with that perhaps. That no matter how legitimate the reason, no matter how genuine the interest, she could not shake the feeling that she was taking something. Now, using up time that wasn't hers to use, asking for attention she had not earned. That is what she felt. Now, there was a professor at her university. A researcher whose work on antimicrobial resistance Zara had read obsessively. And she had attended every public lecture this professor gave. She had cited her papers in her own work, and she genuinely, deeply admired her. And for 2 years, 2 full years, Zara sat in the same rooms as this professor and said nothing. She said nothing, and she was just in the environment of this professor, around the professor, but she said nothing. Until one day, not because she suddenly felt ready, but because a peer nudged her and said simply, just go and say hello. What is the worst that can happen? What is the worst that can happen? You won't be beaten. You won't be scolded. Just say hello. So Zara walked up after a departmental seminar and she introduced herself. She said one specific thing she had found valuable in the professor's most recent paper. And she asked one genuine question. Not necessarily a favor, one genuine question. Not a request, just a question. She asked. And the professor answered the question that Zara asked. And they talked for 8 minutes. 8 good minutes. And at the end, the professor said, I don't think we've met properly before. Send me your email. I would love to know what you're working on. Amazing. That is what the professor said. 8 minutes, one specific observation, one genuine question, and a relationship began that would eventually lead to Zara being recommended for a research fellowship that changed the arc of her career. Just 8 minutes. And the professor was not too busy. She was not bothered. She was not imposed upon. She was, as most senior professionals are when approached sincerely, genuinely pleased to connect with a junior professional who cared about her work. That is all. That is all. Now, the barrier was never the professor to begin with. The barrier was never the professor. The barrier was Zara's story about what reaching out meant. That was the barrier. And the day she challenged that story, everything changed. The day she took a step to challenge the story, everything changed. And I want to spend a few minutes on why this specific thing, approaching senior professionals, feels disproportionately difficult. Because the fear is real. It is, I agree. And naming where it comes from is part of dissolving it. Naming where it's stemming from, it's part of dissolving it. Now, first is hierarchy. It's built into medical culture from day one. From the moment you enter clinical training, you are placed at the bottom of a very clear hierarchy. Student, then intern, then medical officer, then registrar, then specialist, then consultant. And that hierarchy is not just organizational. It is cultural. It determines who speaks first in a word round, who defers to whom in a clinical discussion, whose opinion carries weight and whose does not. And you internalize that hierarchy. You internalize it deeply. So deeply that even when you are outside of a formal clinic setting, even in a seminar, a forum, a professional event, you carry the habit of deference, the reflex of waiting for permission, the assumption that your voice is less valid than theirs until something external grants it validity. And that reflex, valuable in certain clinical contexts, becomes a liability in professional development contexts because it keeps you silent in rooms where speaking would serve you. It does you more harm than justice. Secondly, you are making assumptions about what they think of you. And here is something interesting. When you imagine reaching out to a senior professional, you spend enormous mental energy imagining their reaction. They will think I'm wasting their time. Could be one of the thoughts that you entertain. Or they will see through me immediately. Or they will wonder why I think I'm worth their attention. But here is the thing. Those are your thoughts projected onto them, not their actual thoughts. Because their actual thoughts, most of the time, are far more neutral than you imagine. They're thinking about their next meeting, their research deadline, what they're having for lunch. Now, they are not spending their mental energy imagining the inadequacy of every junior professional who might approach them. So, your catastrophic imagined reaction is a fiction, and you're letting a fiction keep you from real conversation. Now, thirdly, you're confusing burden with investment. When you think about reaching out to a senior professional, you frame it as asking them to give something up: their time, their energy, their attention. Now, as though contact with you is a cost to them. But that framing misses something very important. Most senior professionals actively want to be in contact with engaged, curious, serious junior professionals. Not because they are generous saints, but because it serves them too. It keeps them connected to the next generation of their field, and it surfaces fresh thinking and new questions. So it gives them the opportunity to contribute to someone's development, which most people who went into healthcare find genuinely meaningful. Now, the right kind of contact is not a burden. It is a mutual exchange. The key is making sure your contact is the right kind. And that is exactly what the rest of this episode is about. There is a difference between contact that lands well and contact that doesn't. And it is not about confidence. It is not about connections. It is about approach. Here are 5 principles that determine whether your outreach is received warmly or not. Now, principle number 1 is be specific. The single most common mistake in professional outreach is vagueness. I really admire your work. I'm interested in your field. I would love to learn from you. Now, these statements, they feel warm to the sender. They feel generic to the receiver because they could have been written by anyone anyone. They require nothing of you. No research, no genuine engagement, no actual thought. And senior professionals can feel that. Now, specificity is the signal of genuine interest. Now, when you can say, I read your paper on antibiotic stewardship in resource-limited settings, and I found your point about community-level prescribing patterns particularly striking. I had not considered that angle before. Now, you have the attention. You have the attention of the professor, of the senior colleague, because that sentence could only have been written by someone who actually read the paper, who actually thought about it, who brought their own perspective to it. Specifically, it proves you did the work. And doing the work before the relationship even begins is the most powerful signal you can send to the person you intend to connect with. Principle 2, lead with giving, not taking. Lead with giving and not taking. Now, most outreach from junior to senior professionals follows the same structure. Hello, here is who I am. Here is what I want from you. And that structure, however politely framed, is fundamentally extractive. It positions the senior professional as a resource and positions you as someone who needs something. Now flip it. Lead with something you can offer, not money, not service, something simpler. Your genuine engagement with their work, that is a gift. Your specific observation or question that adds something to the conversation. Your willingness to assist with something concrete, even something small, that is value offered before value asked for. Now the structure changes to, hello, here is something genuine I want to bring to this conversation. If it resonates with you, here is what I'm hoping we might explore together. That is a completely different energy, and it produces completely different responses. Principle 3 that I want you to know: ask for something small and specific. One of the most effective pieces of advice I ever received about professional outreach was this: never make the first ask big. Now, a big ask could be something like this: can you be my mentor? Can you review my CV? Can you recommend me for a position? Now, when you put such a demand, it places an enormous cognitive and relational weight on a person who doesn't know you yet. And even if they want to help you, the size of the task creates resistance. Now, a small specific ask is almost always easier to say yes to. Would you have 15 minutes in the next few weeks for a brief call? Would you be willing to point me toward one resource that you think is essential for someone at my stage? May I attend your next public lecture and perhaps introduce myself briefly afterward? Small, specific, easy to fulfill. And once someone has said yes to a small thing once, the relationship has begun. And bigger asks become possible over time because now there is a context, there is a history, a reason to invest further. Principle number 4. Make it easy to respond. And this is a practical principle that most people overlook. When you reach out, however you do it, think carefully about what you are asking the person to do in order to respond. If your email requires them to make 3 decisions, compose a paragraph, consult their calendar, and think carefully about what to say, it will sit in their inbox. And the longer it sits, the more likely it is to never be responded to. Not because they don't want to, but because every time they open it, the cognitive load of responding feels too high for a busy person who has other priorities. So make it easy. Ask one question rather than 5. Offer specific time slots rather than asking them to name their availability. Keep your message short enough that it can be responded to in 3 sentences and reduce the effort required. And your response rate will increase dramatically. Principle number 5, follow up, and do so once. Now, the vast majority of unanswered messages are not deliberate rejections. They are casualties of a busy inbox. A message seen in passing and mentally flagged for later and later never came. It is completely appropriate to follow up once. After 5 to 7 days, you can do that. A single brief friendly nudge would help you. It could look something like this: I wanted to follow up on my message from last week in case it got lost. I completely understand if you're not available. No pressure at all. I simply wanted to make sure it reached you. And this is warm, non-pressuring, and it's human. Most people, when followed up with grace rather than impatience, will respond. Do not follow up more than once. One follow-up is professional persistence. Now, 2 or more becomes pressure, and pressure closes doors. I want to give you 3 message templates that you can adopt and use, not to copy word for word, but as starting points. Structures you can adapt to your specific situation, because knowing the principles is one thing. Staring at a blank message compose window is another. Now, template 1, this you can use after a talk or a seminar, and this is the easiest entry point. You've just finished an engagement with someone, or you've spoken to them after the conference or a seminar. You have something genuine to respond to, and the interaction is natural, not out of nowhere. It could go something like this: Dear so and so, my name is so and so, a recent pharmacy medical or nursing graduate from this and this university. I attended your talk on this topic at this particular venue, event, or institution, and I have been earlier this week, of course, and I've been thinking about this specific point you made, since it reframed something I had been considering about maybe this particular topic in a way I didn't expect. I would love to learn more about your work in this area. Would you be open to a brief 15-minute conversation at your convenience in the coming weeks? I'm happy to work around your schedule completely. Thank you for your time and for the talk. It was genuinely one of the most stimulating professional conversations I've been in this year. Warmly, your name, your contact, your LinkedIn URL. Now, notice what that message does. It introduces you briefly without over-explaining. It references something specific, not generic admiration, and it offers a response to their idea, showing you engaged intellectually. It makes a small specific ask, and it makes it easy to say yes, and it closes warmly, not obsequiously. It doesn't do that. Template 2 is a cold outreach, where you are reaching out to someone you have never met. You're just reaching out to establish contact and begin a relationship. Now, this is harder, but it works. And the template looks something like this: Dear so-and-so, you put in their name. My name is so-and-so, and I'm recent graduate based in this particular place with a strong interest in, you mention your area of work. I came across your work on, you mentioned the specific paper, project, or initiative or interview, through how you found it, and I found your approach to specific element particularly compelling. It connected to something I've been thinking about regarding, you put the related topic, and I haven't been able to stop turning it over. I am at an early stage of building my career, and I deeply respect the path you have taken. I am not writing to ask for anything significant, simply to make myself known and to ask if you might be open to a brief conversation at some point at your complete convenience. If now is not the right time, I completely understand, but I wanted to take the chance of reaching out rather than simply admiring your work from a distance. With respect, put your name, your contact, and your LinkedIn URL or link. Now, the phrase admiring your work from a distance does something specific. That phrase does something specific. It is honest and slightly vulnerable. And that honesty, that small admission of admiration without pretense, makes the message human in a way that formal professional language rarely is. Now, senior professionals receive many polished, formal, carefully constructed messages. A message that sounds like a real person is memorable. And I'll share template 3. And in template 3, you can use it in following up after a brief in-person meeting with the individual. Now, you spoke at an event. It went well. Now, you want to maintain the connection. And template 3 will look something like this. Dear so-and-so, it was a genuine pleasure to meet you briefly at this event last week or this day. I appreciated the time you gave me. I know events like that can be demanding. I've been thinking about what you said regarding this and this or this particular topic. It has shifted how I'm thinking about this and this particular topic. I would love to stay connected as I continue to develop in this particular area. With your permission, I will follow you on LinkedIn, and I hope our paths will cross again in a professional context before too long. Thank you again for the conversation. Warmly, this put your name there. Now, this is short, this is specific, this is warm, and it does not ask for anything. It simply maintains the thread. And sometimes maintaining the thread is the entire point, because relationships are built in maintenance as much as they are built in initiation. Now, most conversations about networking, it focus entirely on the approach, the introduction, the message, the first contact, and then they stop, as though the relationship is built in the reaching out. But the reaching out is just the beginning. It is just the beginning. That is the reaching out. What happens after the first conversation is where most people lose the thread. And losing the thread is almost as costly as never reaching out in the first place. First, always follow up with a thank you. After any conversation, whether in person, by phone, or by video, send a brief thank you within 24 hours, not a lengthy email, 3 to 4 sentences. Thank you for the time. Here is one specific thing I took from our conversation. Here is one thing I'm going to do as a result of what you shared. Now, that follow-up does 3 things. It shows gratitude, which is basic human courtesy. It shows that you listened, that the conversation had real impact, and it gives the relationship a natural next step, because now they know you are acting on what was discussed. Secondly, stay in touch without always needing something. The most common mistake people make after a successful first connection is disappearing. They reach out when they need something. They get it or don't. And then they go quiet until the next time they need something. And over time, the relationship becomes transactional. And transactional relationships are very fragile. So instead, stay in touch in low pressure ways. Send them an article you think they would find interesting. Congratulate them on a publication or an achievement you notice. Share a brief update on what you're working on. Ask a follow-up question about something they mentioned. Now, these small, regular, low-pressure touch points are what keep a professional relationship warm. And a warm relationship has been is one that has been consistently maintained. It's far more likely to produce genuine support when you eventually do need it. Thirdly, give back as soon as you can. Now, the relationship between a junior and a senior professional does not have to flow only in one direction. As you grow, and you will grow definitely, look for opportunities to give back. Share a resource that might be useful to them. Assist with something they are working on. Connect them with someone in your growing peer network who might be relevant to their work. Express sincerely. Now, what I'm talking about express sincerely is that the conversation we had 6 months ago led to something real, that their advice had an actual outcome in your life, because that feedback, knowing that their investment of time produced something, is one of the most meaningful things a mentor or senior professional can receive. And it is the thing most likely to deepen the relationship further. And I want to tell you something about a message I almost didn't send. Early in my career, before I had the language for any of what I've been teaching you this week, there was someone whose work I had followed for a long time, a senior figure in health communication, someone whose approach to making medical knowledge accessible to non-clinical audiences had shaped how I thought about my own work. And I had an opportunity to attend an event where this person was speaking. I sat in that audience for 90 minutes, thinking the whole time about whether I should introduce myself afterward, going back and forth, finding reasons why I shouldn't. So She wants to know who I am. I don't have enough to say. Those are the excuses I was telling myself. I'll say something wrong. She's surrounded, or she'll be surrounded by people. And then the talk ended. And she was surrounded by people, of course. And I stood at the edge of the crowd for 7 minutes. And then I left. I went home and wrote an email. It's about 11 p.m. to an address I found on an institution's website. I wrote it in the way I've described today: specific, brief, genuine, small ask. And I pressed send before I could talk myself out of it. And then I put my phone down and assumed nothing would come of it. And you know what? She replied within 3 days. We had a call, and that call opened a door that I'm still walking through. Not because I was special in any way, not because my email was perfect, but because I sent it. That is the only reason I sent it. Now, the message you are drafting in your head right now, the one to the person you've been thinking about since the beginning of this episode, send it. Not when you are ready, not when you have more experience, not when you have something more impressive to say. Just send it now. Because the version of you that sends it, even imperfectly, is already ahead of the version of you that wait. And that is episode 12 of After Campus series. Before you go, 2 things that I would like to ask of you, as I've always done. First, I want to make this episode immediately actionable. Right now, before you close this video, I want you to identify one person you have been meaning to reach out to. Just one person. And I want you to write the first draft of a message to them tonight. Not send it if you are not ready, just write it. Because the hardest part of reaching out is not the sending necessarily. That is not the hardest part of reaching out. It is getting the words out of your head and onto a page. Start there. Drop a comment that says message drafted when you've done it. And I'll be in the comments looking for you. Secondly, is about the next episode. That is episode 13. We are moving into LinkedIn, the most underused professional tool in African healthcare. How to build a profile that works for you. What to post, how often, and what the common mistakes are. And how to use the platform to make opportunities come to you rather than you always having to chase them. If you have been putting off building your LinkedIn properly, tomorrow or the next episode is the day we fix that. I'll see you then. This is Dr. Libea Bethwell, and this is After Campus series.